Welcome back. In this video, we're going to begin working on our dirt generator node. So I'm just in a brand new default scene here, just the default cube in the scene and a couple of lights and cameras. We're going to delete that just now and add in the monkey head. I'm then going to use Control 3 to add subdivision surface to that and shade it smooth. And we'll go to the shader editor. Now, this is the only change I've made from the default startup file. And the only thing I've really done here is change this to a 3D view and a shader editor on this side. I'm going to get rid of my gizmos and my overlays, change over to cycles, and I'm going to turn off scene world so I can use one of these HDRIs. And I'm just going to turn down the world opacity as well so that it's not getting in the way. And now we have this full screen here that we can use for our material preview. I'm going to add a new material to this. And this is where we're going to work on our dirt generation mode. Now, one last thing that I think I'll do is I'll just turn on denoising in the viewport so that things update a little bit faster. So the basis for this dirt generator node is actually going to be the roughness node that we created previously. So I'm just going to change this window to an asset browser. I'll go up to my search bar and I'll just type in roughness. And there we have our roughness generator. I'll just drag and drop this directly onto the scene here. And we can use this to generate our dirt map. So let's just look at the output. And with our default settings here, we actually have a decent looking noise. I'm going to take down the tarnish noise just a little bit and take down the patchy noise a little bit as well. I'll take off the swirling noise and the low contrast noise. Maybe just have a little bit more of this grungy one and a little bit more of this high contrast. Let's see, we'll maybe adjust the scale a little bit. And in fact, before we do that, let's add in our texture coordinate nodes. Using Control T, we'll delete this image texture because we don't need it. And we'll also change to object mode. Okay, and I think I quite like the look of this. So the way this dirt is going to work is basically these black areas or these darker areas are going to be our dirt. The areas where we have light colors, we're going to see through that into our default base color. I'm going to change this over to this orange color just now. We're also going to take the roughness down quite a bit. Let's take it down to about 0.05. So we have something that has a decent amount of reflection, but not too much. So now what we want to do is we want to use the output of this roughness generator node to get something that looks a bit more like dirt. The first thing I want to do is I want to just adjust the contrast of this a little bit. So we'll go to color and choose a brightness contrast node, and I'll just increase this contrast a little bit. Let's take it to about 0.3. And let's adjust the brightness a little bit as well. Maybe put that up to about 0.2. Just brighten things up a little bit. And I think I also want to take the color ramp node and just use this to increase a little bit more contrast. I also want to bring the white flag down quite a bit. So you can see we have a lot more white areas, a lot less dirt. We'll maybe put this up just a tad. About 0.1 or so, and there we have basically the dirt that's going to go on top of our object. Now we can definitely use this brightness contrast and this color ramp later on in our node group. I'm just going to make a little bit of space and let's set up our outputs for our diffuse color. So let's grab our color mix node. Let's plug this in here. Now this color mix node is actually going to go into factor. So if we take our default color and put it in slot A, and this second slot we make a dark color. So let's just take this value down a bit. Let's make this kind of dark brown color. So now we have our diffuse map. And let's plug this straight into our base color and look at the result. So this is what we have at the moment. We have dirt covering our object and we have full control over our dirt color. So let's say we want to make this a kind of dark green, kind of mossy color. We can do that quite easily. Now, one thing we don't have control over at the moment is how strong this appears. we just have this standard color here. So this is perhaps where we can start to bring these settings into play by increasing or decreasing the amount of dirt. So we'll have to remember that for later on. Now this black flag you can see is going to kind of bring up the contrast. This white flag is going to add more dirt in. So we'll be able to plug those into our controls later on. One thing that we won't want to do is we want these flags switching. So if we use both these controls, we have to set a stop point for the black flag, probably around about 0.15 or so. And we'll have to set a stop point for the white flag, just a little bit higher than that, probably about 0.16. So we'll keep that in mind for later. As we increase that, we'll get less of that dirt. One other control that we could do is we could set up another mix color node here. So let's try mix color. We'll plug this in here. Again, this default color we will want in this slot, and we'll probably set this to multiply as well. And now we have a factor here, so we can actually adjust that. So once we have our correct setting dialed in on this side, maybe something like this, we can then grab this one and start adjusting this to get a little bit more control over that. Now you can see that our color is slightly changing there. Everything's getting multiplied on top. So maybe instead of multiply, we maybe want to use something like mix. And that way, if we look at this, you can see that we're getting the same slot A color. We're just getting a little bit more of slot B. So now we have controls that we can use for the amount of dirt, as well as the strength of that dirt. Now this is going to be a setting we won't want to change too much, because we don't really want our dirt to be too see-through, too transparent. We want to keep that green color. But so far, I think that's enough for our diffuse color. Let's just move this out the way a little bit. Now we're going to use this same output for our roughness. But one thing to consider is we want these black areas, which are the dirt, to be more rough than the light areas. So one thing that we'll have to do is add in probably an invert node. So let's just take that, connect this up to color, and plug our color into our roughness. And let's have a look there. Okay, so now we can see that we have something different happening there. You can see on our dirt we have more kind of diffuse reflections, and on our original surface we have something a little bit lighter. But this isn't giving us much control, so again we're going to use a mix color node. We'll plug this in here. This is going to go in slot 2, and we're going to set this to lighten. And immediately you can see we've got a little bit of a difference there. We'll increase that and decrease this down. You can see a little bit of a change is happening there. Now if slot A is our original roughness, we want that to be quite glossy. And we're going to lighten this up so that in our dark areas, we should be getting a rougher area. Now, looking at this, our invert node doesn't really seem to be doing what we want it to do. So this is our dirt. This is our invert node. Lighten. Okay, so something a little bit strange is happening here. Now let's see if we can figure out what that is. So our color ramp node has dark here, which relates to slot A in this mix node. So in actual fact, our dirt shader, our white areas are the dirt and not the mix. So I think what we have to do here is just switch these slots over a little bit. We'll pull that down there, and we'll pull this across here, and we'll make this our dirt color. So again, we'll take that to black and have a look at that now. Okay, so that seems to be working, but our factor is going to go the opposite direction. That's perfectly fine. We don't have to worry too much about that. This white flag is going to increase the amount of dirt, which is fine as well. I think this black flag actually we can keep around about 0.15. Okay, so that's working a little bit better now. Right, finally we need to do our normal map. So let's go to vector bump, plug in our normal map. Now this invert node has these white areas, and these are going to be raised. But if we look at our dirt color extends out a little bit too far. If we put this invert node into our height at the moment and have a look at that, I think our dirt is getting raised up in too many areas. You can see here, we're getting a lot of raised up areas and a lot of flat areas. So maybe we want to adjust this a little bit. Now the strength is something that we can put down immediately. We'll take that to about 0.2. But then I think what we could do here is we could use something like a color ramp node. And we could adjust these flags a little bit. So let's have a look at the result. So these white areas are all going to be raised up. We can increase this black level a little bit. So we're just not raising quite as many of these areas as we were previously. Okay, and I think that looks a lot better. Now again, we could use these flags as controls in our roughness map, but I think that's okay. And just as a basic dirt generator node, I think this is going to work out. Let's take that bump over there. I don't think we'll use that. There are a couple of other controls that I want to put into this, but this is our basic setup at this point. So I think it's challenge time. Okay, so your challenge at the end of this video is to set up the initial node group by selecting the nodes you want to be within the node group and try and pick the correct inputs and outputs for the node group. Remember to choose meaningful names and appropriate defaults, minimum and maximum values for all your inputs. So pause the video, have a go at that, and join me in the next video and I'll show you how I would set it up. I'll see you then.